Rabbi, I have a very important question to you.
How many black hats? Yeah.
No. This is gonna rattle your mind even more.
Uh-oh.
Are there more wheels in the world or more doors in the world?
More what?
Wheels in the world or more doors in the world? Wheels versus doors. What do you think?
I'm wondering how do you even think of these questions?
Okay, this one I didn't come up with. This is like breaking the internet right now because people are trying to determine if there's more wheels or doors in the world. So I want to know, are you team wheels or team doors?
Doors.
Okay, why?
That I can't reveal that.
All right. So you want to know why I'm team doors?
Yeah.
You have this sitter right here. You open the door and it transforms you to a new realm.
Yes, right.
So I feel like each book is essentially a door. So
Life is full of doors. Yeah.
Okay, so this is a weird question, but I've been wondering this. So I know that when you text the mezuzah on the door, it's just like you're remembering Hashem, right? So if you're in one of those hotels and there's a really long hallway with mezuzahs on all the doors, could you potentially put your arms out on both sides and run to either side, tagging all the mezuzahs and get like, no?
you should only do it if you're going into or exiting the door.
You said it's a weird question. If you would do that, it would look a little weird, you know. We're right down the hallway. Everything we do is weird. You're right.
No.
I want to tell you an interesting thing. In truth, you don't even have to put your hand on the mezuzah. Just look at the mezuzah, and that's also fine. And b'chlal, we don't have to do it with every mezuzah. It's usually the door that I'm going into. You know.
I have another question. So the giant mezuzah at Ben Gurion Airport, is it just a small scroll inside, or did someone make like a giant, massive, like foot tall letters of the Shema? Like, I want to know, is it just like giant mezuzah like case with just a tiny little baby mezuzah hanging inside?
Yeah, usually when you see a bigger mezuzah, like here in the school,
Yeah.
the bigger ones usually means that the actual writing is bigger.
So how big is the writing in the mezuzah at Ben Gurion Airport? And also, what does it look like when they take it down to check it? Or is it just...
So I don't know. Never saw that.
Wow. I want to know, is the Shema like a...
I feel like they have to like go like on an airplane to check it, like it's that big.
Well,
Like,
no, I mean,
I said cool, they used to write it, and it's that big.
that's so fun.
Yeah.
And if you have to like write this, anyways, thank you for...
Okay.
Rabbi is team doors, everyone. No, it's so true.
So like if any student asks you a question in your class, don't answer it. You have to distract you. It's always so
I don't
funny.
know.
I also do it sometimes. But if I'm not like want to be in class, it's so funny.
I don't know. We didn't start last year.
But they lived in buildings, so they had walls, but they lived in like tents and it's ancient Sumerian.
And another question before we get started. On the 8th day of Pesach, what is your favorite Gebruch item? Like when Chabad, we let loose, we go crazy. What's your favorite thing to do with the matzah?
I forgot. That was a year ago.
Rabbi, come on. Like, are you a matzah pizza guy?
Okay, we're gonna start. The truth is, we're still in the middle of discussing Tchis HaMesim, but the problem is that there was a certain part that we're up to now, and I couldn't get hold of making the copies. So I guess I'll take a detour. I'll go to the next class and we'll go back to it when I make those copies. It was copies related to the subject, the specific part of the subject of Tchis HaMesim. So the next thing we want to talk about is the third and final Beis Hamikdash. So when we talk about Mashiach, we also talk about the third Beis Hamikdash. In so many places in davening, that's what we mentioned. When we learn the Rambam about the signs of Mashiach, that the person who's Mashiach is authentic, one of the signs are that he will rebuild the third Beis Hamikdash in Yerushalayim. So let's just point out in this booklet here, let's point out a little bit, page 1, we say this in davening every day. which means not besides the fact that we've already asked Hashem to send the Geulah, there's a specific prayer specifically for the Beis Hamikdash, and that's the bracha of Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim, return in mercy to Jerusalem, your city, dwell there as you've promised. And the way the Mefarshim explain, what does it mean that the city will be returned to the way it was originally? It means that Beis Hamikdash will be rebuilt, and then Yerushalayim will be what it's supposed to be. Also, and we do this, by the way, 3 times a day. We do it for Shachris, we do it for Mincha, we do it for Ma'ariv. Then at the end of the davening, that's on page 2. There are not enough copies, or there are there extra copies? Should be extra. On page 2, you see that at the end of Shemona Esrei, there's a prayer after we finish. What's the prayer? May it be your will, Hashem, the God of our fathers, that the Beis Hamikdash be spiritually rebuilt in our days and grant us our portion in your Torah, which means even though we made this bracha in the Shemona Esrei, at the end, again, we make a prayer, and this prayer is that the Beis Hamikdash should be rebuilt. And again, this prayer is also repeated 3 times a day. If you also happen to eat during the day, wash for bread, and you do benching, in benching, we also have this bracha. And that is, where it's underlined on the bottom, the 4th bracha. As you know, that the benching was composed by different people. The first part of the benching was written by Moshe Rabbeinu. The second part of the benching was written by Yeshua. This part, which is on page 3 and starts with the words Rachem, this was written by the Bezdin, the rabbinic court of David HaMelech and Shlomo HaMelech. And what does it say? Hashem, have mercy upon Israel, your people, Yerushalayim, your city, and Tzion, your abode, that's the Beis Hamikdash. Your glory, the kingdom of the house of King David. So basically, we see again in benching that we ask for bracha for the Beis Hamikdash to be rebuilt. And after we finish that, how does it conclude? On the next page 4, rebuild Yerushalayim, the holy city, speedily in our days, and blessed be Hashem, who mercy rebuilds Yerushalayim. Rebuilding Yerushalayim doesn't just mean that there's places to live there. It means that the Beis Hamikdash is rebuilt, which means even today, where Jerusalem is an unbelievable, beautiful city, but until the Beis Hamikdash is built, it's not really what it's supposed to be, Yerushalayim. So I want to go a little bit into the history and the source of the holding of the Beis Hamikdash. So the best place to look is here in the Rambam Maimonides, where he talks about the halachas, but also about sort of the history of it. He goes like this. This is in the Rambam, and the laws are actually called the laws of Beis HaBechira. Another name for the Beis Hamikdash is Beis HaBechira. It means the house which was chosen. And the reason why, it's based on a pasuk in the Chumash where Hashem says, only bring the sacrifices in the place that I chose, which is the Beis Hamikdash. But it means, just like it says a reference to the Jewish nation, that Hashem chose us to receive the Torah, he chose this place to be his home. So it's called the house of the chosen house. It is a positive commandment to construct a house for Hashem, and this house is prepared for sacrifices to be offered within. We must celebrate there 3 times a year, like it says in the Torah, and you shall make me a sanctuary. So the source of the Beis Hamikdash is a pasuk in Chumash Shmos, Parsha Truma, where it says you should build a sanctuary for me. And then we'll soon go through the stages of this sanctuary. But the Rambam writes that, as we know, the sanctuary is the place where Hashem's presence is found, but practically there are sacrifices that need to be brought, and we Jews should visit the Beis Hamikdash 3 times a year, which are the 3 holidays. Which 3 holidays? One is Pesach, one is Shavuos, and the other is Sukkot. There's no commandment to be in the Beis Hamikdash for Yom Kippur, and there's no commandment to be there for Hanukkah, no commandment to be there for Rosh Hashanah or Purim, but there is a commandment for Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. 3 holidays. Yep.
All right. So is 770 just gonna just be like transported into Jerusalem?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Look, at least I know I'll still be able to take great Instagram pics in front of it. So like, good, ready for Mashiach. Yeah.
It'll land right next to the base of Mikdash.
Okay, so it's like base Mikdash 770.
It'll be an annex to the base of Mikdash.
Okay, well, there'll be a little tunnel connecting.
Yeah.
All right, nice.
I have a
Beautiful.
good question. So I've always heard that either the base of English is gonna be built, right? Actually built, or it's just gonna fall from the sky. If it falls from the sky, is it just gonna completely crush Al-Aqsa? Or is Al-Aqsa just gonna have a
Well,
You better get out of the way. or else
one
you
thing
can't
is,
open the way.
one thing is, we are approaching this based on what it says in a lot of different sources, that when Mashiach comes, it's not going to be, there won't have to be a war with the Arab people, but they will agree to prepare the spot and prepare the place for the base of English. It'll be in a willing way, not in a way of war. Peaceful way. So now the first stage of a Beis Hamikdash was the sanctuary in the Midbar. That we know, that's in the Chumash. In fact, that's what this week is all about. We're learning how the sanctuary was built and Hashem's presence came down. Now the Rambam goes on. So what was next? After they were in the Midbar in the desert for 40 years, they went into Eretz Yisrael. When they went into Eretz Yisrael, as the Jews entered the land, they erected the sanctuary in Gilgal. There was a place called Gilgal, and they put up the Beis Hamikdash there. It was not a Beis Hamikdash. We use the two terms interchangeable, but when you say Beis Hamikdash, you're referring to one that Shlomo Melech built out of stone. When we say Mishkan, which means sanctuary, we're referring to the one that Moshe built, or similar to that, which was made out of wood and out of skin of animals. So in this place, the Beis Hamikdash was now here for 14 years. And these were the 14 years that it took them time to conquer the land and then divide the land. As we know, that every tribe had to live in a different part of Eretz Yisrael. So it took 14 years. So now this is the second location. By the way, in the desert, where was the sanctuary? Was it in one place or in different places? What?
One place.
Of course. No, it was in one place, which is the desert. But in the desert itself, there were 42 journeys, and wherever they went, they had to build the Mishkan. It was portable. They carried it, they put it together, and put it back together.
First mobile home.
What? The first mobile home, right? Hashem is the one who had the first mobile homes.
How did they clean it for Pesach?
The Kohanim were very good.
All right. So what you're saying is we just need to get Kohanim to do all the work for us.
To the door.
Yeah.
Now, what we're saying is that when you clean the dorm, you have a schus, you're just like the Kohen in the Beis Hamikdash.
Rabbi.
It's probably easier to keep the pace up when you're traveling than in one place, because in one place you have all the buildup and all the corners.
Rabbi Majeski.
Yes, good morning.
Buy a new house.
Good morning. I'm curious, when all the Jews go to Israel, what about those Jews who have non-Jewish families, like a Jewish man who has a non-Jewish wife and non-Jewish kids? Will they be separated from their families, or will their families come along?
Good question. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, that's okay.
It would need some research. Right. Yeah. Especially considering the fact that in most cases that it happens because of lack of knowledge and lack of appreciation of what really means to be Jewish. That's something which is done as a rebellious act. But I don't know. I don't even know if there is a source for it or it has to be researched. The next place that they went to with the Beis Hamikdash was a place called Shiloh. This was already different. In Shiloh, they built a house of stone for the first time. Up until now, it was more like a tent. That was a mobile home. This was made of stone and was stationary and permanent. But on top of it, they spread curtains of the sanctuary. The same curtains that they used in the sanctuary, they put on top. It didn't have a roof. Not on top, I mean, it spread as over the walls. They didn't have a roof. The sanctuary of the Shiloh stood for 369 years. By the way, if you ever visit Israel, one of the tours they'll take you is to the city called Shiloh. and they actually have an assumption where the spot was. How do they do that? Is because they're basing it on, they find roads that you can see these are walked through. I mean, imagine thousands of people for 369 years walking down the roads to the same spot. There's an impression left, and they're following that to imagine where the Beis Mikdash must have been standing. So this one was a sanctuary that stood for 369 years. And when Eli died, Eli was the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, and he was also the leader of the generation. When he died, this was also destroyed. It was destroyed by a nation called Plishtim. Afterward, after Shiloh, they went to a place called Nov. They built a sanctuary there. When Shmuel died, that was destroyed. Then to a place called Givon, and they built a sanctuary there. From Givon, they went to the Yerushalayim. So there were two places where the sanctuary was standing before it was built through Shlomo Melech in Yerushalayim, and after they left the 369 years in Shiloh. How many years was it in these two places? 57 years. So altogether, he just described these few locations. The desert was the first location. Gilgal was the second location. Shiloh was the third location. Neiv and Givon was the fourth and fifth location. And Yerushalayim is the sixth. And the second Beis Hamikdash is the seventh. It's the same location, but it's the seventh Beis Hamikdash. And when Mashiach comes, it's the third. We call it the third, but it'll also be the eighth, or if you count from the beginning. Once the Beis Hamikdash was built in Yerushalayim, it became forbidden to build a sanctuary for Hashem or to offer sacrifices in any other place. Here we see that the sanctuary is portable and you can move it around, and you set it up in one place and then they move, so they set it up to another place. Once it was built in Yerushalayim, no matter where we moved, because that's what happened after it was destroyed, we went to Babylon, we went to Rome, we went to this country, that country, but you're not allowed to set up a Beis Hamikdash any other place in the world except for this place. And it's based on a verse in the Torah where Hashem says, this is my place forever. There is no sanctuary for all generations except in Yerushalayim, and specifically on the mountain, which is called Har HaMoriah. That mountain is called Har HaMoriah. Let's turn the page. As it says, this is the house of Hashem. This is the altar for the burnt offering of Israel. Then it says these words, this is my resting place forever. That means Hashem will never choose any other place except for this spot on the Beis Hamikdash. What? What number? You asked me the page number? 7. Where am I? Where are the numbers? The numbers on the bottom of the page.
Ah,
This way, yeah.
thank you.
The design of the building, the Beis Hamikdash that was built by King Solomon, is described explicitly in the Book of Kings, and in the one of the books of the prophets, which is called Malachim, and it's in contrast the design of the temple that Mashiach will build, which is the third temple. Even though it's mentioned in the book of Yechezkel, it's not so explicit and it's not so clear. And the people in the times of Ezra, when they built the second temple, it was built similar to the structure of Shlomo Melech, and in certain aspects similar to what's in Yechezkel. So basically, the second Beis Hamikdash was in some ways similar to the first, and in some ways similar to the third. And the third is the one that's in the book of Yechezkel. It's very difficult to understand, but so happens to be that today, because there's so much emphasis on learning about it and studying it, and people have all sorts of models where they build it, and they're into the Beis Hamikdash. Many books have been published where they actually go through verse by verse in Yechezkel explaining those measurements, which were always considered very difficult to follow. Then he goes like this: the following elements are essential when it comes to constructing the Beis Hamikdash. And he mentions these three things. The first is the sanctuary. The second is the Holy of Holies. And the third is in front of the sanctuary, there should be a place called the entrance hall. And all three together is called the Beis Hamikdash. So, what's the sanctuary? The sanctuary is that room that had in it three items: the menorah, the table with the bread, and the altar that was used for incense. And that's called the sanctuary. That's called Kodesh, the holy place. And the next one is Holy of Holies. Yeah.
So I know in Torah writings, so you were talking about the Heskel and Malachim, but historically, didn't Josephus also describe like what the temple looked like?
Who?
Josephus, I think he was around like
Yeah.
the time of destruction.
Could be he describes it, but it's not a Torah book.
Right.
And not only not a Torah book, there's a lot of controversy about who he was. Some say that he was a traitor, that he was a Jew, and then he went over to the Romans. So not everybody's excited about what he says. On the other hand, he has historic things, but there's questions. Can we trust everything he says or not? Which means Josephus. It's a book called Josephus. And he writes about what happened in the time of the destruction of Beis Hamikdash. Yeah. Yeah.
Basically, in 2019, when I was in seminary in Israel, they took us in the old city. There's a place called the Temple Institute. Yeah, where they have like all the cabling ready and stuff. But they also showed us a video of like the future blueprint of like sorry, Sarah, of like how they're gonna build like the third temple. Like they already have the blueprint and it's like made out of like full glass, whatever. They have like a structure. Is that allowed? To like plan what we're gonna make it look like? Like it's very modern. I don't know. Is that a thing?
Modern. How will they take you to the Beis Hamikdash?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Good food and all that.
The people who are in charge of the Institute of the Beis Hamikdash are people that are from Torah scholars, and they're doing all their research from a Torah perspective. So I guess, obviously, they're following opinions that you're not allowed to build a Beis Hamikdash. You're allowed to build a model, and they're just building a very sort of life-size model that'll give people a more of a vivid, view of what it's really going to look like.
Right. I actually had a teacher that he got like arrested because he was like Meshuggah. He would like take bricks and go on top and try to like build the Beis Hamikdash. He's like one of those guys that live in Hebron.
And we're not allowed to build it definitely without Mashiach instructing us to do it. Right. Anyway, if you want to attract attention, it's definitely a good thing to do. Yeah. Okay. These three altogether are called, okay, so what are the three things again? We should really work backwards. The Holy of Holies is that's where the Aron and the Luchas was, the Ark and the two tablets that have the 10 Commandments on it. And we know there are two of them, the one that were broken, and then the second one. Both of those sets were in this box. Yeah.
So, like in a sanctuary today, they take out the Torah. Would they take out the tablets for to read them? They take out Torah.
No, they never took out the tablets to read them. It was just there, right? And there was, in fact, Torah reading in the Beis Hamikdash, but they read it from a regular Torah scroll like we do.
They had Torah scrolls.
They had Torah scrolls then too, sure. The one who wrote the first Torah scrolls was Moshe. He wrote 13 of them. He gave each one to one tribe, and one was in the Beis Hamikdash. Yeah.
Separate from the tablets.
Right. There's different opinions. One opinion says that there was a piece of wood, like a little shelf, next to the ark, and on top of that they put the Torah scroll. Yeah.
So I heard that all Sefer Torah, they actually have like a small amount of impurity because of some ruling that was made, and so they don't actually know how they would get the Sefer Torah into the Beis Hamikdash because you're not allowed to bring impurity to the Beis Hamikdash. Is that true?
I never heard that you wouldn't be allowed to take a Torah into the Beis Hamikdash. But what you're referring to is that there was a time where people kept their Torah scrolls near Truma. Truma is food that is considered holy, and only a Kohen can eat it. And people would say, this is holy, and this is holy. They kept it next to each other. But the mice didn't know about it. So the mice would come and it would damage the Torah scrolls. And therefore they said that if you put it near the Truma, it's going to make the Truma impure. In other words, only in reference and in context of that, it's considered impure. Right. Yeah, it reminds me of the story where there was once a fox that was passing by a tree, and there was a bird on top of the tree singing. So the fox says to the tree, and fox says to the bird, why don't you come down here? We'll have a good time together. He said, are you kidding? You'll eat me up. He said, no, you didn't. You know, Moshiach is here already. And when Moshiach comes, everyone's living peacefully together. There won't be any problems. And as they're talking, about 10 wild dogs come running. And the fox starts racing away. And the bird screamed, but you said Mashiach is here. I said, yeah, but the dogs, they don't know about it yet. You know? So the mice don't know that a Torah scroll is holy and you can eat it. Yeah.
All right. So the Kohen Gadol, will it just be the same one forever after Mashiach comes? Because the issue with the other ones were like, yeah, this one guy that was doing really well for 40 years, and then he went in and it was like, you're done.
80 years.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So still. But then after that, you had like a lot of them where they're like, yeah, I'm so great. They went into the Holy of Holies and
Well, in general, once a person died, there was a new person. So you're asking a question. When Mashiach comes, being that there won't be any death, Aaron himself will be back, the Kohen Gadol. So obviously he'll have the honor to be the high priest. Will he be the high priest forever?
yeah.
I won't mind if he'll be the high priest forever.
You what?
I won't mind if he'll be
Okay.
elected to be the high priest forever.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yes.
You said that the mice would come to the truma, so it made me thinking, if you set aside truma and mice came and like contaminated it, were you still, you would see the mitzvah?
It's not about a mitzvah. The question is whether you're allowed to eat something if it's because it's impure. But I don't think mice don't make it impure. Only if it's a dead mouse it becomes impure.
So if mice came and like ate part of it, and then you gave it to
I wouldn't eat it anyway once they ate part of it.
the. But you were still, no, because it's a mitzvah, right?
It's a mitzvah to have separate the truma from the rest and then
Just
eat
the
it.
separation.
Right. But in other words, the eating itself is because this food has a certain holiness to it. So that's why people thought if that's the case, it's appropriate to put the food near the Torah scroll. But the food could attract mice and it would affect the Torah scroll. So that's why they said to be careful.
But if the mice came, it didn't like affect them.
I don't think so. And that's unless for the reason that it's just not healthy to eat food that had mice. Yes, Nadja.
So it's kind of a strange question. If the Kohen Gadol died in the Holy of Holies, how did they get him out?
They tied a string.
There was a string on
They
its
did?
foot. Yeah.
Oh, cool, that's
Well,
awesome.
after a few of them died, they
Yeah,
were like,
but, like-
what's happening?
But unfortunately, even though you're not allowed to go in, but if there's an accident like that, someone, Kohanim, go in and take the person out. But after, in the times of the Second Temple, it happened very often because there was a big movement in those days of tzedukkim. People didn't believe in the written Torah, in the oral Torah, only in the written Torah.
Wait, how did they go in then? Because wouldn't they have died too?
Nobody, they did,
Oh, so it was just like a continuous.
but they never went in, only on the day of Yom Kippur.
Uh-huh.
And when they went in, they did the services of the incense the wrong way. Generally speaking, in the Torah, when you look at the words in the Torah, it appears that you light the incense outside, it gets smoke, and then you bring it inside. But the oral Torah explains that that's not what it means. You're actually supposed to bring it inside and light the fire and make the smoke inside the Holy of Holies. If you did it the wrong way, the person who did it and went in doing it the wrong way, unfortunately died on the spot. So in that generation, there was a big movement, and this movement believed only in the written Torah, not in the oral Torah, but on the outside, you couldn't tell so clearly which if they belonged to the movement or not. So therefore, the Kohen Gadol would go in, but he did it the wrong way, and they would die. After it happened a few times, they tied a chain to his legs, and if Chas v'Shalom would happen, they had to pull him out. Yeah.
How did they like didn't they realize they were wrong after the first couple died and like, why did they keep doing this movement and keep like going in?
It's a good question.
They were kind of insane.
Very loyal to the movement.
Only that loyalty was used in a good way.
There's an opinion that says that they so much wanted to go into the holiest of holies that even if it would cost their life, they were ready to do it just to get into the holy of holies. Okay, so again, we have the three. Let's try the three parts again. So one part is the holy of holies. The other part is the part that's called Kodesh Holy. That has the three things: the table, the menorah, and the incense. And the third part was a big high structure that was built as, like he calls it here, a sort of a hallway. It was called in Hebrew the ulam. In fact, in Israel, when you're going to a wedding, the wedding halls are called ulam. That's ulam means a wedding hall. It was a hallway, an entrance to the holy and the holy of holies. These are the three things. And then there was more parts to it, and that's where they had the other mizbeach for the sacrifices and so on. Okay, now he goes into, anybody else had a question? I just want to say there was also another thing in the Holy of Holies, and that is the stick that Moshe Rabbeinu always used. No, not that stick, the stick that, there was a story in the Chumash where Aaron was being challenged. Moshe was being challenged by Korach. And he said that you're choosing people to have high positions, but they're all your relatives. This is your brother, and this is your brother's children. And he led a revolution against Moshe. It's a story in the Chumash. And what happened? They said that everybody should put down a stick near the Beis Hamikdash, near the Holy of Holies. And if a miracle happens with one of the sticks, that there's going to be something growing on it overnight, that's a sign that they're the person that Hashem chose. So everyone put their sticks down. And Aaron's stick grew almonds overnight. And that proved that Aaron was the one that Hashem chose to be the Kohen, and his children are Kohanim, and it wasn't, God forbid, Moshe Rabbeinu's own idea because it's his family. That stick that proved that Aaron was really the one that Hashem truly chose is also in the Holy of Holies. And there was another thing in the Holy of Holies. There was a little glass that had in it a piece of the mun that fell in the desert. That was also there. And the purpose of that was to remind the Jews, don't worry about sustenance, especially when it comes to Shemitah, like this year. Once the 7 years, you weren't allowed to work in the fields. So how are we going to survive? So they had this to remind everyone that the Jews were in the desert, not for 1 year, not for 7 years, but for 40 years, and Hashem provided. So don't worry, he'll provide here as well. When Mashiach comes, all these things will come back. The Aron, the luchas that are inside, the Sefer Torah that was there with Moshe, the stick, and also the glass bottle with the mun. It should be pretty exciting. Okay. What? And it was a miracle that it didn't spoil, right?
Because usually it would spoil, right? Like if you didn't eat it or something like that?
Then, yeah, after the first, every day they only got for a day, and then it disappeared, right? Number 6, there were certain vessels or articles in the Beis Hamikdash, which is part of the major structure. And it goes like this. First, he calls them utensils, but they're also utensils or furniture. The altar for the burnt offering and other sacrifices. The second thing was there was a ramp. In order to go on the altar, it wasn't through a staircase. You weren't allowed to go up on a staircase. It had to be a ramp. And where was it? It was before you go into the entrance hall on the left. As you enter, it's on the left, which is the south. Then there was a wash basin with a pedestal where the priests would sanctify their hands. Where am I? 7, then should be page 8. The priests would sanctify their hands. Something missing. Is this, that's page number on top? 18, 19. Then goes 28, 29. How did that happen? Okay, let me explain it orally. We'll do the oral Torah now. It's there was a basin and the way they used to wash their hands was put their hands and feet under a faucet, and that would prepare them for, and the water also had to be prepared in a very special way, and that would allow them to do the service. If they did the services without washing their hand before, it was invalid. And this is one of the reasons for the custom that when we go to shul to daven, first thing is we go to the sink to wash our hands, because davening is in the place of the sacrifices. The shul is like a miniature Beis Hamikdash. Before we do our services of davening, we also wash our hands. What?
Is that without a blessing?
That's without a blessing, and it's not an obligation like the other kinds of washing. It's just a custom. So let's do next page, which says 8. I'm just going to do the beginning of chapter 2. The Rambam writes that in the Beis Hamikdash itself, there was a spot where they built the altar for the sacrifices. He says like this: the altar is to be placed in a very precise location, which may never be changed. As it says, this is the altar for the burnt offering of Israel, which means this is the spot. You can't change the spot. And then he goes on to say, what's so unique about that spot? Isaac, Yitzchak, was prepared to be sacrificed on the temple's future site. As it says, go to the land of Moriah. In other words, the spot where the Mizbeach is a very precise spot where Avram built the Akedah. And Shlomo Melech, when he began to build a house on Yerushalayim, he appeared to David, his father, in the place that David had prepared. It says in the threshing floor of Ornan, that's the person who owned the place before, and that's the very spot where there was the Beis Hamikdash. I don't know why I'm missing. No, it is. Next page, page 9. It is universally accepted that the place on which David and Solomon built the altar, which is the threshing floor of Ornan, that's the name of a person, he owned this place before, is the location where Abraham built the altar on which he prepared Isaac for sacrifices. Before Abraham, Noach built an altar on the very same location when he left the ark. It was also the very same place which Cain and Abel brought their sacrifices, and that was in the beginning of creation. Adam, the first man, he offered a sacrifice also there, the very same spot. In fact, our sages say, man was created from the place where he would find atonement, which means when Hashem took sand, and from this sand he formed the body of Adam Rishon, the first man. Where did he take the sand from? That very same spot where the Beis Hamikdash is built. So that means this spot on the mountain, which we don't know where it is, but when Moshiach comes, we'll know it's this spot. That's where the Mizbeach has to be. That is also the spot where the first human being was created from, and Hashem chose that same spot, which means obviously, even though it's a physical location, but it has in it something spiritual, which makes it the appropriate place for the Mizbeach of Avram, Noach, Adam, Cain, Hevel, and for the entire fall of eternity. When Mashiach comes, this is going to be the spot of atonement for the Beis Hamikdash. Next, page 10 is just a copy of the book of Yechezkel, where it says that Hashem showed him the third Beis Hamikdash. Now, the questions that we brought up: who's going to build it? Will Mashiach build it? Will Hashem build it? Will it come down from Shemayim? So, in the next class, we'll go into these details. These are the next few pages. More details about the Beis Hamikdash to be continued. And hopefully by then I'll have those copies that we need for continuing the subject of Tchias HaMesim. Okay.
Continued.
To be continued.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I read it. It's very nice what you wrote.
Yeah.
And it's not totally wrong because there are parts in the Chumash, and especially in Rashi, which talk about what happened when they actually built it. So I'm still looking to see if there's a place where it talks about when they built it and it stayed permanently. But they did build it. They
They
just-
built it.
And then they took it apart
They
at
took
night.
it apart.
Right, but still, the building only began in Parshas Pekudei, right? But they took it apart.
But
Our
they took it
Parsha,
apart.
our Parsha begins with what happened on the 8th day once they didn't take it apart.
Perfect. I thought that in Pico Day, they built it and it stayed, but no,
Right,
because they did it 7 times
7
again.
times, right, exactly.
But Pico Day was the first one of the 7, or no? Pico Day was just still practicing.
I think nobody was still practicing. I didn't get a chance to look through it,
Uh-huh.
but I think it's all 7 days I mentioned there. Yeah. Okay,
Thank you
but
so
otherwise,
much.
so what was the art site you told me? What was it?
Yeah, it
Yard
was
site.
Adar II.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
It's chus, very good chus.
Rabbi,
Yeah,
you don't have to worry about mice. We'll just put up a picture of Rabbi Shiloh and we'll be good.
okay.
Because he's like the rat rabbi. Everyone, that's what I've heard. People put on.
Not
the
a nice
picture.
way of putting it.
That's what people call him.
The rabbi?
People, when it's so nice, they put up a picture and they go.
Not the rabbi.
Hi girls, good morning. This is Pearlstein's gonna be here for Megillah this morning, but Mrs. Goldstein's gonna do none. Yeah.
Thank
We get a chance to see him first.
That's great. Thank you. Someone. Hi, Chava. How are you? Nice to see you here in person. Hey, Bina. And Chanel, I'm gonna end this for now.